Welcome to the HR Tech Nexus podcast, the go-to resource for small and mid-sized businesses ready to revolutionize recruiting and onboarding. Twice a week, we deliver actionable, budget-friendly tech strategies to help you compete for top talent globally without enterprise-level costs. If you're drowning in manual hiring tasks, battling compliance headaches, or stuck with clunky HR systems, you're in the right place. We break down tools like AI-driven applicant trackers, seamless onboarding platforms, and compliance automation, all scaled for SMEs. Join me as we unpack real-world strategies from HR leaders who've slashed time to hire, boosted retention, and built future-ready teams.
Welcome back, everyone, to HR Tech Nexus podcast and to another deep dive.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be digging into something that I think is really relevant for a lot of our listeners.
Yeah.
Which is how small and medium-sized enterprises can reduce their time to hire using technology.
Yes, absolutely. I mean,
we all know it's a really tight talent market out there, and any advantage that you can get is really going to help you.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things that we talk about a lot is efficiency, right? Oh, yeah. And when we talk about technology in the HR space and in the recruiting space, a lot of it is about efficiency and speed.
Right. And I think one of the sources that I shared with you before this deep dive talked about how AI is becoming, they kind of positioned it as AI is not just a buzzword.
Right.
It's really like a game changer in a lot of ways.
It is, yeah. And
when it comes to...
It's interesting because I think there's a lot of fear around AI right now, especially, with ChatGPT and everything that's coming out and people are, fearing for their jobs and everything. But in recruiting and in HR, AI is really just a tool that can help make things more efficient.
Right.
And it's not meant to replace humans. I think that's important to note.
Yeah. And I think one of the examples that they gave in that particular source was, AI can now scan resumes like in seconds.
Yes.
And it can also analyze like video interviews to like look at personality traits and all these really interesting things.
Absolutely. And there are some companies out there that are doing some really cool things with this. One example is Pymetrics.
Yeah.
Pymetrics uses AI to analyze a candidate's behavioral data.
Okay.
So they have candidates take these games, almost like online personality quizzes, but much more sophisticated.
Okay.
And they use the data from those games to predict how successful a candidate might be in a particular role.
Wow.
So it's almost like a personality matchmaking service, but for jobs.
It's like a dating app, but for employers and employees.
Yeah, exactly. It's about finding the right fit.
Okay.
And AI can help you do that much faster and more efficiently.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And they also gave a case study in there where they were talking about how a particular tech company was able to reduce their resume review time from like 3 weeks.
Wow.
Down to under a week.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Using AI.
Absolutely.
So that's a huge time savings right there.
Huge.
Okay, so we're talking about AI, but, let's get practical for a second.
Yeah.
A lot of our listeners are from small and medium-sized businesses.
Right.
Is this kind of technology really accessible to them?
It's becoming more and more accessible.
Okay.
And, there are a lot of different tools out there that are specifically designed for SMEs.
Okay.
And... even if you're not ready to invest in a full-blown AI-powered recruiting platform,
right,
there are other things that you can do to streamline your process.
Okay, so what would be an example of that?
Well, one of the biggest things that I recommend to SMEs is to implement an applicant tracking system, or ATS.
An ATS, okay, so that's like, what is that, like a software or?
It's a software, and it basically helps you manage your entire recruiting process.
So it's like taking all the resumes off my desk and putting them all in one place, or?
More than that, it's about centralizing everything. So your job postings, your applications,
okay,
all of your candidate communications, feedback, everything is all in one system.
Wow.
And this can save you so much time and reduce errors and just make everyone's life easier.
Okay.
So instead of having to juggle spreadsheets and emails and all of that, you have everything in one central location.
That's great.
So it can really streamline your process and make things much more efficient.
And are there real-world examples of companies that have done this and seen results?
Absolutely. There are tons of case studies out there. One example is an enterprise software company that I was reading about that sped up their recruitment process by 30% just by implementing an ATS for communication and feedback.
30% just from that? Just
from that.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, so it can really make a big difference.
Okay, so it's not just theoretical. There are real-world examples.
Real-world examples.
Okay, I'm liking this.
Yeah.
So we've got the AI, we've got the applicant tracking system.
Right.
But let's not forget about the candidates themselves.
Right.
In this like fast-paced world of hiring, it's really easy to accidentally ghost people.
Absolutely.
And that never makes a good impression.
Never.
So, and
candidate experience is so important.
Yeah.
And it's something that a lot of companies overlook when they're trying to speed up their hiring process.
Right.
But, it's important to remember that candidates are people too.
Yeah.
And they deserve to be treated with respect.
Right.
And they want to know what's going on in the process. So how can we use technology to kind of help with that? How can we keep candidates engaged and informed throughout the process?
Right.
Without, adding more work to our plate.
Right. So like robot butlers who are just like catering to the candidates' every whim or...
Not quite, but there are tools out there that can help with this. So things like chatbots that can answer basic questions instantly. So imagine a candidate applies for a job,
right?
And they immediately get a response from a chatbot that confirms receipt of their application.
Okay.
Answers some frequently asked questions.
Right.
That's a much better experience than just being left in the dark.
Absolutely.
And you also have automated scheduling and reminders.
Right.
Which can take the headache out of coordinating interviews.
Yeah.
So, no more back and forth emails trying to find a time that works for everyone.
Yeah, that's the worst.
The system can just handle all of that for you.
It's like we live in a world where we just expect everything to be instant now.
We do. And candidates expect that, especially younger generations. Yeah.
They're used to getting information instantly.
Right.
And they expect the same from the companies that they're applying to.
Right.
So, we need to adapt to that.
Are there any companies that are doing this really well?
Yes, there are. One company that I was reading about is Maya Systems.
Okay.
They have a chat bot that can handle up to 75% of initial candidate interactions.
Wow, 75%.
75%. So think about all the time that frees up for your team to focus on more strategic tasks.
Right.
It's incredible.
Yeah, that's a lot of time.
It is.
Okay, and are there any other success stories with this kind of automation that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a logistics company that was able to reduce their interview scheduling time from days to hours.
Wow.
By using automation.
Okay.
And they actually saw their overall time to hire decreased by 40%.
40%?
Which is incredible.
Well, that's amazing. Okay, so we've got AI helping us identify promising candidates.
Yeah.
We've got an ATS to help manage the process.
We've got automated communication to help keep everybody engaged.
Yes.
That's a lot of different systems, though.
It is.
Is there a way to kind of bring it all together?
There is, and that's where integration comes in.
Okay.
So the real magic happens when you connect all of these different technologies into one smooth workflow.
So it's like having all your tools talking to each other and...
Exactly. They're all sharing information and automating tasks.
Wow.
So you're not having to manually transfer data from one system to another.
Right.
It's all happening seamlessly.
Okay, so what would be an example of a platform that does that?
So some popular examples are Greenhouse and Lever.
Okay.
These are platforms that offer integrated solutions for everything from sourcing and screening to interviewing and onboarding.
Oh, wow. So it's like a one-stop shop for all your HR needs.
Exactly.
Okay, well, this sounds fantastic, but I think the question that's on everybody's mind is, how much does this all cost?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
And it's a valid concern. There's definitely an upfront investment involved in implementing these technologies.
Okay.
But it's important to remember that the ROI can be significant.
So you're not just spending money, you're investing it wisely.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you don't have to go all in at once.
Right.
You can start with one or two tools that address your biggest pain points.
Okay.
And then gradually scale up as your needs change.
So you can start small.
Start small.
Okay.
And you'd be surprised how much even a small investment in HR tech can improve your efficiency and ultimately your bottom line.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's just do like a quick recap of what we've talked about so far.
Yeah.
The big takeaways, I guess.
Big takeaways, yeah. So we've talked about how technology can be a powerful ally for SMEs in the quest to reduce time to hire.
Right.
We've talked about AI-powered screening.
Yep.
automated communication, ATS, all of these tools that can help you streamline your workflow, improve the candidate experience, and ultimately find the right people faster.
And that's really the goal, right?
That's the goal.
But before we move on to our next part of our deep dive, I'm curious to get your thoughts on, we've talked about efficiency and we talked about speed.
Yeah.
But what about quality?
That's a great question.
Can technology actually help us find better candidates?
It can, and that's something we're going to dig into in the next segment.
Okay.
I'll give you a hint. Data-driven insights can be incredibly powerful when it comes to making more objective and informed hiring decisions.
Okay, so stay tuned, everybody.
Stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
So, we were just talking about how technology can help you speed up your hiring process.
Right.
But a lot of people worry that when you focus on speed, you sacrifice quality.
Right.
But what if I told you that technology can actually help you find better candidates?
Okay, now that's something I want to hear more about. Because I think that's the dream, right?
It is.
To find high-quality candidates quickly.
Exactly. And technology can help you do that.
Okay, so how does that work?
Well, think about traditional hiring. It often relies on gut feelings and subjective judgments.
Right, just kind of like looking at a resume and being like, oh, I like this person.
Exactly, and that can be very biased.
Right, of course.
But with technology, you can bring data into the equation.
Okay.
And make more objective decisions.
Okay, so instead of just going with my gut, I've got data to back me up.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. But it also sounds a little intimidating.
It can be, but, it's about finding the right balance.
Right.
AI can analyze huge amounts of data to spot patterns and predict which candidates are most likely to be successful in a specific role.
Okay.
So it's like having an extra set of eyes.
But these eyes can see things that humans can't.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not like a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But it's like a really powerful data crunching machine.
Exactly.
Okay, so where does all this data come from?
It can come from a lot of different sources. So resumes, applications, social media profiles, assessments, video interviews.
Wow, it's gathering all that information.
It is, and it can analyze all of that to create a much more complete picture of a candidate.
So how do I know which data points are actually important? Because it seems like you could get lost in a sea of data.
That's where the human element comes in.
Okay.
HR professionals bring their expertise to the table, understanding which data is meaningful for specific roles and using it to make smart decisions.
So it's really like a partnership.
It is.
Between the AI and the human.
Absolutely.
Okay. I like that. So we've talked about finding the right people and we've talked about vetting them and, making sure they're a good fit.
Right.
But what about after you've made the hire?
Yes.
How can technology help with onboarding new employees and getting them up to speed quickly?
That's a great question, and it's another area where technology is making a huge difference. Onboarding can be very tedious, filled with paperwork and repetitive tasks.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be that way. Imagine if onboarding felt more like an interactive experience, almost like a video game.
Okay, a video game, I'm intrigued. Now, are we talking about like training simulations or something?
That's one aspect of it. There are tools out there that can automate and streamline the whole process, from digital paperwork to interactive training modules.
Okay.
And gamification is a big trend, making learning more engaging and fun.
So like new hires are learning about company policies and procedures while earning points and badges or something.
Exactly. It's about making onboarding more interactive and enjoyable, which leads to better engagement and knowledge retention.
Okay, that sounds way more fun than just reading through a giant handbook.
Absolutely. But beyond the fun factor, technology can also ensure that new hires have all the information they need right from the start. So company policies, benefits info, training materials, it's all easily accessible.
So it's like having a virtual onboarding buddy who's always available to answer questions.
Exactly.
I like that.
And by automating those tedious tasks, your HR team has more time to focus on creating a welcoming and inclusive onboarding experience, the kind that makes new employees feel valued and excited to be part of the team.
Okay, so it's not just about checking the boxes and making sure the paperwork is done.
Right.
It's about really creating a positive experience for new hires.
Absolutely.
Okay, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So we've talked about, these interactive modules and digital paperwork, but are there any other technologies out there that are being used for onboarding? Like I've heard about virtual reality and augmented reality.
Right.
Are those just buzzwords or can they actually play a role?
Those are definitely not just buzzwords. VR and AR are starting to make their way into onboarding, and it's pretty exciting. Imagine new hires using VR headsets to take virtual tours of the office, meet their team members virtually, and even practice their job responsibilities in a simulated environment.
Wow, so it's like stepping into the future of work.
It is.
Okay. But are SMEs actually using these technologies right now, or is this something that's still, years away?
It's still early days, but VR and AR are becoming more accessible, and they have the potential to revolutionize how we onboard new employees.
Wow. It's amazing to think how far technology has come.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've gone from paper applications to AI-powered screening to VR simulations.
Oh, incredible.
But let's be realistic for a second. There must be some challenges that come with all of this. We can't just blindly adopt every new technology that comes along.
You're right. You need to be strategic about it. You can't just throw technology at a problem and expect it to magically disappear.
Right.
You need to think about things like data privacy and security.
Okay.
With all this data being collected and analyzed, making sure it's handled responsibly and ethically is crucial.
Yeah, that's a really important point. We don't want to sacrifice privacy for the sake of efficiency.
Exactly.
So what are some other things that SMEs should consider when they're implementing new HR technologies? What are the potential pitfalls?
One common pitfall is neglecting user adoption.
Okay.
It's great to have these fancy new tools, but if your team isn't comfortable using them, they won't be effective.
Right. It's like buying a high-tech coffee machine, but never learning how to use it.
Exactly.
It just sits there.
You need to invest in training and support to make sure your team understands the benefits and knows how to use the technology effectively.
Training and support are key.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, technology is constantly evolving.
All right.
What's considered cutting edge today might be outdated tomorrow.
That's true.
So it's a continuous learning process.
So you have to stay up to date.
You do.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
All right. So we've covered a lot of ground in this discussion. I think it's clear that technology has the potential to truly transform the way that SMEs approach hiring and onboarding.
It does.
But before we move on to our final part, I want to leave our listener with some practical advice.
Okay.
What are the key takeaways from this segment?
So we've talked about how technology can help you find better candidates, not just faster.
Right.
Data-driven insights can help you make more objective decisions and really understand a candidate's potential.
Okay.
We also explored how technology can revolutionize onboarding, turning it into an engaging and interactive experience. And finally, we touched on the importance of being strategic when implementing new technologies, focusing on data privacy, user adoption, and continuous learning.
Those are all really great points.
Yeah.
But there's one more piece of this puzzle that I think is really important for SMEs to consider, and that is the shift towards skills-based hiring.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think I've heard the term, but I'm not sure I fully understand what it means.
Yeah, so skills-based hiring is all about shifting the focus from what's on paper, degrees, titles, years of experience, to what someone can actually do.
Okay.
So instead of just looking at a resume and hoping for the best,
right,
skills-based hiring involves using assessments, simulations, portfolio reviews, and other methods to directly evaluate a candidate's skills and abilities.
So you're actually testing their skills.
Exactly.
Not just taking their word for it.
Exactly.
Okay, why is this becoming so important now?
Well, the world of work is changing rapidly. The skills that were in demand 5 years ago might be obsolete today. And traditional hiring methods often miss out on talented individuals who might not have a fancy degree, but have the practical skills that you need to get the job done.
Right.
Skills-based hiring helps you tap into a wider pool of talent.
Okay.
Which is especially important for SMEs who are competing for talent with larger companies.
So it levels the playing field.
Exactly.
Okay, so how does this work in practice? Can you give me an example of what a skills-based hiring process might look like?
Absolutely. Let's say you're hiring for a software developer in a traditional hiring process. You might focus on the candidate's degree in computer science and their previous job titles, but with skills-based hiring, you might give them a coding challenge.
Oh, right.
Or ask them to work on a small project to demonstrate their coding abilities.
So instead of just assuming they can code because it says software engineer on their resume, you're actually going to see them code.
Exactly. And there are some amazing platforms out there like HackerRank and Codility that provide coding challenges and technical assessments specifically for this purpose.
So it takes the guesswork out of it.
Exactly.
You can actually see what they can do.
Exactly. And this approach isn't just limited to technical roles. You can use skills-based hiring for all sorts of positions.
Yeah.
For example, platforms like Glider.ai and Vervo allow you to create custom assessments that simulate real-world job tasks regardless of the industry.
Okay, so there are tools out there that can help you do this.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
And when we come back, we're going to dive even deeper into skills-based hiring.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
We're going to be wrapping up our conversation about how technology can be a game changer for small and medium-sized enterprises.
Right.
Especially when it comes to hiring and onboarding.
Absolutely.
We've covered a lot, but before we go, I really want to dig into this whole concept of skills-based hiring.
Yes, definitely.
Because I think it's something that a lot of companies are talking about, but maybe not everybody fully understands what it means.
Yeah, it can be kind of a buzzword.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But it's actually a really important shift in how we think about hiring.
So can you break it down for us? What exactly does skills-based hiring mean?
So basically, it's about focusing on what a candidate can actually do rather than just their credentials.
So not just looking at their resume and saying, oh, they went to this school or they worked at this company.
It's about looking beyond the resume and actually evaluating their skills and abilities.
So how do you do that?
There are a lot of different ways. So you can use assessments, simulations, portfolio reviews. You know, anything that allows you to see the candidate's skills in action.
So give them like a test or...
Yeah, like a test or a project or something like that. So you can actually see what they can do.
Okay, I like that a lot. Why is this becoming so important now?
Well, I think there are a few reasons. One is that the world of work is changing so rapidly.
Right.
The skills that were in demand 5 years ago might be obsolete today. So it's not enough to just look at someone's past experience. You need to know what they can do right now.
Okay, that makes sense.
And another reason is that traditional hiring methods often miss out on talented individuals who might not have a fancy degree, but they have the practical skills that you need to get the job done.
So maybe they're self-taught or they learned through experience, but they don't have that piece of paper.
Yeah, and skills-based hiring helps you tap into that wider pool of talent, which is especially important for SMEs who are competing for talent with larger companies.
It levels the playing field.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm sold on the why, but I'm still a little bit fuzzy on the how.
Yeah.
So can you walk me through an example of what a skills-based hiring process might look like?
Sure. So let's say you're hiring for a software developer. In a traditional hiring process, you might focus on the candidate's degree in computer science and their previous job titles. But with skills-based hiring, you might give them a coding challenge or ask them to work on a small project to demonstrate their coding abilities.
So you actually get to see them code.
Exactly.
Okay. And I imagine there are tools out there that can help companies do this.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some amazing platforms out there like HackerRank and Codility that provide coding challenges and technical assessments specifically for this purpose.
So it takes the guesswork out of it.
Exactly.
Okay. And this isn't just for technical roles, right?
Right. It's not just for tech roles. You can use skills-based hiring for all sorts of positions. For example, platforms like Glider AI and Vervo allow you to create custom assessments that simulate real-world job tasks, regardless of the industry.
So you can really tailor it to the specific job.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. But let's switch gears for a second and talk about the candidate experience.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked a lot about efficiency and using technology to speed things up.
Right.
But how do we make sure that we're not losing sight of the human element in all of this?
That's a great question, and it's something that's really important to me.
Yeah.
You know, technology should enhance the candidate experience, not detract from it.
Right.
And it all starts with communication. Keep candidates informed at every stage of the process.
Right.
Even if it's just an automated email letting them know that their application has been received.
Right. It's like you're acknowledging them as a person, not just a number.
Exactly. And personalization is key. Don't just send out generic messages.
Right.
Use the data that you've gathered about the candidate's interests and skills to tailor your communication and make it more relevant to them.
So it's like you've actually read their resume.
Yeah. You know who they are.
And don't be afraid to use technology to add a human touch. Video conferencing is a great way to conduct virtual interviews and connect with candidates on a more personal level.
Right.
You can even send personalized video messages to stand out from the crowd and show candidates that you're really interested in them. But that's a really good idea. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
I think we've really painted a clear picture of how technology can revolutionize the way SMEs approach hiring and onboarding.
Absolutely.
But before we sign off, any final thoughts or words of wisdom for our listeners?
Well, I would just say that the future of work is here and it's being shaped by technology.
Yeah.
And for SMEs, this is an incredible opportunity to level the playing field and compete for top talent.
Right.
So don't be afraid to experiment, learn, and embrace the power of technology to transform your hiring and onboarding processes.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And to all of our listeners out there, we hope you found this conversation insightful, and we encourage you to check out the show notes for links to all of the resources that we mentioned.
Yes, definitely.
And be sure to subscribe to HR Tech Nexus podcast so you don't miss any of our future deep dives.
Yes.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining us on the HR Tech Nexus podcast. Ready to take action? Head to hrtechnexus.com to access today's episode resources, including actionable guides, real-world case studies, and free tools to streamline your hiring and onboarding. Don't miss our weekly newsletter for bite-sized HR tech hacks, software comparisons, and compliance tips tailored to SMEs. No enterprise-level budgets required. And if you're ready to transform your HR workflows with custom-built solutions, book a free discovery call with our experts. We design strategies that fit your company's size, industry, and global needs. Until next time, innovate boldly, outsmart the status quo, and let's build HR teams that don't just compete, they dominate.